Nobody can break down fights like our next guest. You know his phenomenal work and incredible previews from his channel, Full Reptile, as well as, of course, his great work on BT Sports with the Dan Hardy Breakdown Show. One of our absolute favorites to chat to, especially as we take a look at UFC 271, the one and only, the Outlaw is in the house. Dan Hardy, welcome back, man. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How are you?
Very, very good, man. Appreciate you joining us. I'm not going to dilly-dally. I'm going to get straight into it because there's a lot to talk about. It is, of course, UFC 271 fight week. Dude, I can't wait for this fight. Arguably the greatest competitive rivalry in the UFC's middleweight history. Okay, so let's talk the big factors. One of the major narratives going to this one is obviously Robert Whittaker accepting the first defeat and admitting that he got emotional. You know, he got sucked into the mind games and the occasion, and his ego got the best of him. How much of a factor do you think ultimately that ego was in the first fight, and how crucial do you think it was for him to admit these things if he's going to have success in this current rematch?
Well, I think the fact that he's admitted it shows that he's faced it and he's watched the fight and he's absorbed the lessons from it. You know, the biggest concern when any fighter comes off a devastating loss is that they don't go over it and get what they can out of it. You know, there are lessons to be learned. There are certain things that they've done wrong. I've spoken to lots of fighters in the past that have not watched their last fight because it was a knockout loss, and they still don't know exactly what sequence happened. I mean, that for me is, I mean, I understand it. You know, there's a lot of emotion attached to the fight, but at the same time, you know, there's free information for you and for your future opponents. So I'm really pleased that he's watched it. I'm really pleased that he's accepted the fact that he was emotional, because he was. It was obvious. I understand why he was. You know, he'd fought Yoel Romero twice and was the middleweight champion, and out of nowhere Israel Adesanya was fighting for an interim belt. I understand why he felt like he had something to prove, like, you know, he wanted to get in there and put Adesanya away early, and he thought he would be able to. Underestimated his striking and left himself open, and I don't think he's going to do it this time around. You know, I mean, he did the same thing against Darren Till when he returned 9 months later, but since then he's been a solid version of himself, and we've seen development and growth in his game, and the areas where he's developing, his takedowns and his ground control, his ground and pound in particular is very good. Nice short elbows. I think that could be a real problem for Izzy in this fight, and I think that will give him a lot of confidence, seeing Vettori be able to take him down, and obviously Blachowicz, even though he's a decent bit bigger.
When you're Israel and you see him talk about this stuff, what do you think in terms of the fight week? Like, if you're thinking what Israel's thinking going into this thing, do you play around a little bit with Rob? Do you see if you can try and get something out of him during fight week? Do you try and see if you can sort of rile him up a little bit? Or do you sort of approach it a different way this time around going into the rematch?
I think, to be honest, he has the technique to be able to rile him in the first round. I think if Rob stands there in front of him like Paulo Costa did, there are so many targets that Adesanya works on. I mean, the lead leg is going to be a real vulnerability for Rob. We've seen him struggle with it against Jared Cannonier. And I think that Izzy's game's far more developed in the striking ranges than any of these other middleweights. I think he's going to be able to set up those low kicks just like he did against Paulo Costa. So Rob's got to be patient, and he's got to play with the range and the space between him and Adesanya. If he doesn't, and he's there to be hit, Adesanya will toy with him and he'll play with him for the whole fight. And that's when you're at the whim of his striking skill set, which is formidable. I think that's the best thing to get inside Rob Whittaker's head. I think it would probably be a stone wall. If Izzy started trying to trash talk and, remind him of the last fight, I think Whittaker would laugh, knowing full well that he's a different version of himself now. The way to get inside Whittaker's mind is to win that first round and win it convincingly, and start them giving him actual subconscious flashbacks of the last fight.
What range do you think is the best for Robert Whittaker to be in? Because if you stay on the outside, you're likely going to get picked apart. And if you rush in like Rob did in the first one, and also Rob's got that, great style where he sort of stays on the outside, and then he's got the wide stance, and then he sort of darts in and out, especially with the jab. But if you do that, you risk getting countered. So what range do you think works best for Robert Whittaker?
I think, to be honest, his best range is his counter punching range. You know, Izzy likes to counter punch. I think that's his best. That's his most favorable style. Like, you know, when he was in there with Anderson Silva, of course, Anderson Silva's not going to open up because he knows how slick and fast Izzy is. So he didn't. You know, it was a bit of a stalemate, and it forced Izzy to attack. Same thing with the fight against Yoel Romero. You know, he only landed 2 strikes in that first round. He doesn't like it when his opponent doesn't come at him. You know, Paulo Costa was ideal because he stood in front of him but didn't do anything. You know, with other fighters, with the likes of Marvin Vettori, he likes Vettori because he's always present to be hit, and he's quite predictable. So he's able to get his head off center line and counter him. Now, if we look at the Darren Till fight, Rob got dropped with a clean elbow, and he was able to wrestle up from a single leg and survive the rest of the first round. Coming into the second round, instead of going forward against Till, he held back and he waited for Till to come to him. And although, you know, he's going to give up height and reach, I think that explosiveness that he's got can still be applied. But it would just be better if Adesanya was already on his way in. If Rob's the one that's initiating the movement, if you've got the 2 fighters here, if Rob is the one that initiates the movement, he has all that distance to cover while Adesanya is looking to pick him off with those longer limbs, which is going to make it easier for him. If Whittaker's patient and keeps edging himself away and finding space, then Adesanya is going to be forced to close that distance. And if you remember what he did against Yoel Romero in the first round, he leapt in with a big hook, and he got caught with the big overhand left from Romero in return. Rob has good success with his counter striking, and of course grappling, taking him down, clinching him, wrestling him to the floor. Once he's in top position, I think he'll be able to dominate him. The taking him down will be the biggest challenge, because he's got good takedown defense. You know, I think it's 68% takedown defense in his last 2 fights when most of the takedowns have happened. It's still good against Vettori and Blachowicz, and I think that Whittaker would have to work really hard to get him to the floor, but that is obviously a favorable range.
Yeah, because that's one of the things, and Rob was on the show a few days ago, and we were sort of laughing about it because a lot of people were like, hey, like, if you want to beat Israel, just take him to the ground. And Rob's like, he's really hard to take to the ground. There's a reason why he's such a great fighter and he's so successful. Like, it's not, you know, he said it's not fucking easy to take him to the ground. Like, he understands you're not going to just go in there and just be like, hey, I'm just going to take him to the ground now, everything's all good. So I'm wondering, when you think about how Rob's able to actually implement his takedowns during this fight, when you visualize it, how do you see it coming? And do you think it's something that he threatens with a little bit towards the start but implements later at the fight when things sort of slow down a little bit? Or how do you think he sort of strings it all together?
I think he's got a couple of different options. The first option is to threaten with the takedown, but not really intend on getting the fight to the floor. This would be ideal for the first 2 rounds, because that's when Izzy's going to be, you know, at his most defensive with his takedown defense, and he's most measured with his striking. So that would be a good opportunity if Rob did want to close range, or if the range did close down by Izzy stepping forward, he could grab onto a single leg like he did against Darren Till, you know, wait for Till to step forward, grab onto a leg, and then you know, chase the takedown a little bit to start him defending, and then come up with strikes, hooks, uppercuts, and knees. Again, same thing what he did against Darren Till. The other option, which fits nicely with the counter striking style, you know, if he's hanging back and waiting for Adesanya to come in and then looking to slip and counter, or waiting to, you know, as soon as he sees him moving, he can you know, move in quickly and meet him with counter punches. There's also the option to level change right underneath. And what Yan did so well was posturing with the left hook. And then Adesanya, as he does, and as he did against Whittaker in the first fight, he leans back and drifts away and starts throwing hooks and leaves his legs where they are. That's how Yan was having the most takedown success in that fight. Vettori struggled because he was trying to take him down against the fence, and that's where Adesanya is very strong. But out in the open, I do feel like Whittaker can draw him in and then take him down if he gets him overcommitting. It would require patience, though, and that's the real challenge here.
Is there anything that you picked up on? Obviously, the Yan fight was a big example because he lost that one. But was there anything even in the Vettori fight? I think there was like almost this notion that like Adesanya is looking more beatable. I don't know if that's really true. I think it's more kind of like he lost the Yarn fight, and then he got taken down a few times in the Vettori fight, and it's almost like when Fedor got rocked by Fujita, and people are like, "Oh my god!" It's like you're grasping at straws because otherwise he's been so dominant. Is there anything else that you notice in the Vettori fight that you think, okay, that's something that maybe hasn't been exploited yet, that maybe someone like Rob could? That's basically what Rob was saying to us. He was saying, look, there are things that he saw in the Vettori fight that he feels he does better, that he can kind of exploit more.
Well, Adesanya was quite happy to have his back foot against the fence in the Vettori fight. Mainly because I think he's more comfortable at defending takedowns with his back up against the fence. He's able to split his stance and use those Travis Brown elbows to bring his head up, and then he grabs the face and peels him off and runs. It's a pretty simple sequence that we drill all the time in the gym, but he was able to use it over and over again against Vettori because Vettori's not particularly dynamic. He's a bulldozer. He comes forward with powerful straight punches with gritted teeth, and his takedowns and his ground game is 60% muscle. He's a lot of horsepower in his game plans. You can get away with good technique with that, especially if you have a clear path to escape like Adesanya did. I think Whittaker's got better takedowns. I think he's got a more variety of takedowns in his game, and I also think he's a better striker with his opponent trapped up against the fence. Like if you think what happened when he faced Jacare, that's one of the great examples of him making people slip onto his high kick, that snap high kick that he uses. He's very good at trapping people against the fence and tracking them and forcing them to move onto the shots that he's setting them up for. Someone like Adesanya with good head movement, and that moment where he had his ass against the fence and he's doing all this kind of Roy Jones stuff. That's the time to kick somebody in the legs and then set them up for a head kick. I think that's maybe what Whittaker's referring to. Just thinking off the top of my head. But the other thing, of course, is the ability to control him on the ground. Whittaker's right. It's not easy to take him down. Absolutely, it's not. He has got very good takedown defense. I don't know what his exact stat is right now because I've memorized the one from his last 4 fights, which is 68%. But the interesting stat of this, it was 15 of 22 takedowns he defended. So of the 7 times he was taken down, he was controlled for 14 minutes. And in the Vettori fight, the scrambles that he used, he see, this was a bit of a controversial point. I upset a few people in the comments on the breakdown show because I talked about the fact that Adesanya has bad habits in half guard bottom. I'm a big Adesanya fan. I think he's an excellent striker. And if I put myself in his mind, now the level is getting better and better and better every time. Like he went from Rob Wilkinson to Vettori by split decision to then Tavares, Brunson, Anderson Silva, Gastelum. Like that is a very, very quick succession of progress up the rankings, right? Next thing he's fighting Rob Whittaker in front of 57,000 people. Like his game has had to accelerate very quickly. And of course he was a very good kickboxer. So me being a kickboxer, I know this. What do? I bolster my kickboxing with takedown defense. That becomes my main priority because that keeps me where I'm already very good. And then I can build the ground game up. And I think that's what he's doing. But I see bad habits in his half guard. Against Vettori, there was a point where Vettori postures up to strike. Adesanya's in half guard bottom. And he gets an underhook almost accidentally. And then he pulls it out and puts his arm in an arm triangle position, which anybody that's done a decent bit of grappling, if I just show them that clip, and I have because I've taken it on my phone to the gym and showed a few of the guys, I say to them, what's happening here? And they say he's the wrong leg's in half guard. He's not got any control of the leg of his opponent, and he's not fighting for underhooks. And then when he scrambles, he gives his back. And if Vettori can take his back even for a moment, I've got to think Whittaker's going to be able to as well. I think he's fancying a submission. I don't want to give away any of his game plan. I'm just guessing here, but I would think arm triangles and rear naked chokes all day for Whittaker in the 4th and 5th round.
And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what kind of changes Adesanya's camp makes as well, because obviously they'd be looking at that footage and looking at trying to fix some of those gaps too. I'm also curious, Dan, like we spoke about Rob's mental state in the first one. I want to get your thoughts on Israel's mental state going into this one. I saw there was a quote going around where he said he's going to, fuck him up worse than the first time. when you beat someone so decisively the first time, it almost feels like there's pressure in order to replicate that performance. It's kind of hard to win in any better way than what he did it the first time against Rob. Anyway, how much pressure do you think that comes with for Israel going into this rematch? And also for Rob, he's already lost in the worst way possible. I mean, it seems like the pressure is kind of off for him on this one as well.
Well, I mean, you've spoken to him more recently, but he does certainly seem to be enjoying himself a lot more than he was going into the Adesanya fight the first time. You know, speaking to him in Fight Island before the Till fight, you could tell that the weight was wasted off it. You know, the weight had been lifted off him. Like he was smiling. He was sitting in his hotel room in quiet, playing his video games, and he was just in a good place. And you know, he'd gotten back into training through grappling, through putting the gi back on. And you know, I think he's in a much better place psychologically now. It doesn't mean that this is not going to be a very arduous task to get the belt off Adesanya. He's got to play his cards very, very correct on the night, because Adesanya is lethal at one particular range, and it's very good. He's very good at keeping him at that range. But I think Adesanya is coming in. I mean, there is pressure, of course, there is pressure, but I also think Adesanya is very realistic about what he needs to do to maintain his position. Like after paying for it in the first round against Yoel Romero, he never overextended himself after that. I think he's going to be respectful of Rob Whittaker. I think he's going to have watched his recent fights and have absorbed the lessons that there are to be learned. You know, the improvements in Whittaker's game, the vulnerabilities perhaps that he's seen. You know, there are certain things I'm sure Adesanya's picked out, just like Whittaker has of Adesanya. But you know, I think it's going to be a very, very respectful contest between two guys that, have a lot of respect for each other's games. You know, they both know that there's a real risk of them losing here. I just think Whittaker has already been through that process, and he knows that he was a worse version of himself. Adesanya is the one that's got to, kind of maybe I don't know. I don't know as he feels like there would be pressure to do better. I think a lot of fighters would. Absolutely, I do. But I don't know as Adesanya would. I think he'll do what he needs to do to win, which is going to make it very difficult for Rob.
I agree with that, because Adesanya talks about pressure makes diamonds. He was speaking to the sexy Brett Okamoto about how he kind of likes that pressure and feeling almost like in danger. It kind of makes him, pull out all the stops. Eugene Berriman was talking about how this camp's been exhausting because they don't want any complacency. They got such a good win in the first one. You can't be complacent and think, oh, it'll just happen. You have to put in that work. So I think Israel is taking Rob as seriously as ever. And also just, by the way, this preview may sound like so one-sided towards Rob, but that's kind of the story here. It's about, can Rob make the adjustments to make it a different thing? We've already seen what Israel Adesanya can do. You got to think also with Rob, he's going to have a little bit of confidence that he's not coming off a 16-month layoff where he had multiple surgeries, including one for a collapsed bowel. And he's generally been a lot more active. He's had 3 fights in almost the same amount of months heading into this one. What I wanted to ask, though, just on... Sorry, you go, Dan.
No, I was just about to say, I think that's, the reason why I did the breakdown show for anyone that caught it, it's kind of, the story is 2 halves. The first half was Whittaker coming through as a middleweight, what was it, Hester, then I think it was Tavares and Brunson, and, he had a tough row of guys, and then he hit Romero the first time, and then was out for a period of time with the knee injury. And that's when Adesanya made his debut. Had 2 fights before Whittaker came back and fought Romero the second time. And then since, between that point and their first fight, that was Adesanya, 4 fights and he was the interim champion. So their careers were definitely 2 halves before they faced. But then since they've just alternated fights. It was Adesanya, Romero, and then Whittaker Till, Adesanya Costa, Romero Cannonier, Adesanya Blachowicz, Whittaker Gastelum, and then Adesanya Vettori. The fact that they've been able to watch one another, it's like a very long game of tennis, isn't it? They're watching one another. They go and perform, they show a little bit of themselves, and then they absorb a little bit of the other. I think that's fascinating. because they know each other from the first fight, and now they've got this very, very different perspective of one another. This is going to be a fascinating fight. It really is. It's one of the most interesting fights I've ever broken down. Usually I do it I do the analysis and the breakdown and everything in 2 days and then film it the day after. It took me 5 days to do this one.
Wow.
I was just in it for the whole week.
It is fascinating, and it's almost like I don't have a dog in the race, but it's like if Israel wins, you're almost like, wow, the saga feels like it's just ended prematurely. You know what I mean? Like this because they're sort of like A1 and AB, so to speak. Or actually, maybe you can't even say that because of the way the first fight played out. But you just feel like these guys should be fighting more often, you know, against each other, because they're just they seem to be so far ahead of the division. And just on that, who are you leaning towards, and what do you think it sort of says about Rob if he can't get it done here? You know, people throw around the dreaded term gatekeeper, but if he can't beat Israel here, you got to think he's not getting another chance.
Potentially not, but then, you know, we don't know what the future holds, and within 3 fights, Rob Whittaker's back in title contention again. I don't think it's the end of the road for Whittaker. We all forget how young he is still, you know, because he was a welterweight coming through smashes, and then he moved over to middleweight, 5 or 6 fights in. Like, it feels like he's been in the UFC for years, and we think he's a lot older. Like, it's not the end of the road for Whittaker in the middleweight title if he decides he wants to have another run after picking up a loss here. I certainly think it makes it more interesting if he wins, because then we've got this real cool trilogy going on where now, you know, I mean, they may rematch immediately, which would be a very different circumstance as well. But, you know, that would be fascinating. It would kind of tie up the middleweight division. And although obviously they do kind of rule the roost, you know, the two of them at the top, there are a few people, especially a bit lower down in the division, that, you know, we've got to be keeping an eye on. I mean, Andre Muniz in two fights could be in title contention. He's snapping arms left, right, and center. And he's the one that I'm keeping an eye on in the middleweight division. I think he's a terrifying individual. So, you know, and we've also had, you know, Chidian Njokwani made his debut as well. He looks slick as well. So we've got a few people in the middleweight division that I think in the next 6 months we might have an Adesanya versus this person that we've not even mentioned right now, or they've maybe just made their debut. Middleweight's moving very quickly in the UK, across Europe, and in the UFC. So it's not going to be long before we have more contenders. But I would like to see these guys go around a couple more times. To answer your actual question, sorry for going off on a bit of a ramble there.
Alex Pereira also, by the way, while you're mentioning other guys. Of course. Yes, of course. How could I forget him? What a lethal individual. Stone hands. I'm leaning slightly towards Whittaker, but I guess that is a little bit because I like to kind of dream a bit for the underdog, and because he got beat so decisively, I like to. I mean, same thing with the analysis. When I realize when I'm doing it that I do kind of lean towards the person that lost in the first fight, especially if they got starched. You know, it was a rough night for Rob, but I think a lot's changed since then. I think he's in a very, very developmental stage of his game. I think he's got that hunger back to be a student again. And I think he's very dynamic in every range. I think he's, you know, you take 40% off his striking skills and put it into his ground and grappling. And Adesanya is probably 90% striking and 8% takedown of defense, 2% jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? It's like it's heavily stacked in one way for Adesanya. But this is MMA. And I think Whittaker has shown in his last couple of fights that he can be very dynamic, both with his striking in the Cannonier fight and with his grappling in the Gastelum fight. I could see him winning a decision, a hard-fought decision. I could see him coming through a really rough first round or second round where he gets caught with a big kick or a clean shot. But I think there's some forgiveness in the fact that Adesanya is not a knockout artist with the first punch. You know, it does take him a bit of time to get his range and find his target. So I could see Whittaker finding his way into this with a smart game plan. And again, arm triangles and rear naked chokes, I keep seeing them. I think he might be able to catch Adesanya as he's scrambling, especially if he's won rounds and Adesanya's getting desperate to get back to his feet. I can't wait. Can't wait. Yeah. Oh, 1000%. I can't wait for this weekend. The other thing that I also can't wait for is the Monday afterwards, which is Valentine's Day. I can't wait to take my girlfriend out. I'm not even taking her out. We're staying in, and dinner and dessert is sausage and beans, mate. Shaved sausage and beans, thanks to the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0. And I'll tell you, man, now that I go to Mrs. It's great, but before that, I had a lot of horror stories of confidence crippling scenarios where I was going to go on a date. I thought, oh, I don't need a shave. It's fine. It hasn't grown out that long. And then, to my surprise, unfortunately, I was told otherwise. So now I never leave the house without shaving, without having a nice, clean, smooth set of balls. And the best way to do it is with the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0. Don't be like me back in my dating days. Use this one. It's got the 7,000 RPM pure power motor, but it also has the ceramic blade with the skin-safe technology, so you're not rocking up to your date with, all sorts of little tissues and red spots all over your balls from nicking yourself. Also, it's waterproof, so you can just smash it out in the shower. You've got an LED light so you can see what you're doing, and it's got a travel lock just in case you go traveling. You don't want it going off in your bag and alerting TSA. And when you're done with it, chuck it on the wireless charging dock and just move on with your life. And if you get the Performance Package 4.0, you also get the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant. You chuck that on in the morning so you smell nice. You've got the Crop Reviver Toner, which you can just put on at any time in the day if you're feeling not too fresh. You get the Performance Boxer Briefs and the Shed Travel Bag. Oh, and you get the Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer. So everything's shaved. You can do your arms, you can do your back, you can do your ears, you can do your nose, you can do absolutely everything. Manscaped have got you covered. Isn't that right, Dennis?
That's right, man. And for a limited time only, if you guys purchase your Manscaped products, make sure to tag us when you throw it up on Instagram at Submission Radio, and we'll share it. Can't wait to see how Manscaped makes a difference in your life. You guys can get your 20% off and free shipping today with the code word submission. Share your Manscaped moments with us, man. I can't wait to see how it's changed the Valentine's game for the Submission Radio audience. I gotta say, it's a real game changer, though. 20% off with the code word submission and free shipping. Cass, man, this weekend, obviously huge fights. And then you've got the playoffs. This is what everyone's like, okay, this Australian guy talking about the NFL. The Super Bowl. You got the Super Bowl. And there's only one place to go to make all of your money with the UFC and the Super Bowl, and that is with our friends at MyBookie. You guys could sign up today with a code word submission. How about this? You double your first deposit. That's pretty crazy. What about this? Let's just have a quick look at the odds going into UFC 271 right now. The updated odds right now are Robert Whittaker plus 215, Israel Adesanya minus 275, Derek Brunson plus 140, Jared Cannonier minus 170, and you got Tai Tuivasa plus 155 and Derrick Lewis minus 185. But if you guys go on the website as well, they are the king of prop bets. I mean, just these Super Bowl prop bets alone are absolutely crazy. The MVP Super Bowl prop bet, the coin toss Super Bowl prop bet, national anthem Super Bowl prop bet, halftime show Super Bowl prop bet, touchdown scorer Super Bowl prop bet. I mean, it just goes on and goes on and on. Gatorade shower Super Bowl prop bet.
Wow.
I mean, it can't get any better, and there's only one place to go. Go to MyBookie today, use the code word submission, and double your first deposit on this monumental weekend of Sportscast.
Here you go, guys. Also, monumental weekend, we know you're going to be watching the fights. So while you're enjoying the fights and having a good time, who's minding all your details? Who's minding all your credit card details and all the data that you're sharing on the internet? Maybe you're going over to a friend's house, you fire up the fights, but what's his Wi-Fi like? Maybe it's unreliable. Maybe it's not safe. You don't want to be giving out that credit card information to his neighbors potentially. So then you got NordVPN, the world's best VPN, the greatest. You've got over 5,200 safe servers worldwide. They don't slow down any video buffering thanks to NordLinks, and they're in over 60 different countries. So you never have any worries about firing up the fights or accessing them from your app. You don't need to be an IT genius. You just tap the quick connect button and then you're good to go. Reliable encryption. You got 24/7 support and there's zero risks. Isn't that right, Dennis?
Yeah, man, absolutely, because NordVPN offers you a 30-day money-back guarantee, so do it risk-free. And how about this? NordVPN is celebrating their birthday offer. You guys can go to nordvpn.com/submission or use the code word submission to get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan, plus one additional month for free, plus a bonus gift. I mean, if you guys are looking to secure your internet and are looking for the right VPN provider, there is no better time than to go to NordVPN right now, nordvpn.com/submission. Use that code word submission or click the link in the description below and change your internet browsing experience forever. Now, just quickly, Dan, because we've also got Derrick Lewis against Australia's own Tai Tuivasa. I mean, Tai's put together a very nice streak. He's really been able to show some improvement, but obviously Derrick Lewis, he just brings that power as well with him, and he's just not somebody that you can stay in the pocket with and brawl with. I'm curious, what do you think Tai does in this fight? Because obviously he's had some success as well. He's super, super durable and not someone that you want to brawl with either. Do you think it goes out in the first round and both guys just go at it straight away? Or do you think Tai sort of plays it smart and uses his speed and leg kicks to sort of pick Lewis apart a little bit and maybe even sort of speaks a little bit to Mark Hunt and sort of the game plan that he used to beat Derrick Lewis?
You're on the money. You're absolutely on the money. But I think he can learn so much from the Mark Hunt fight. The only downside is that this is 3 rounds and not 5, which means he has to work a little bit faster. But you know, one of the most impressive performances for me with Tai was against Arlovski. You know, he's not an easy person to outpoint. You know, that's how he's been beating all these young guys. And you wouldn't look at Tai and think, oh, he's gonna win by a decision. Like he's a thunderous puncher, and he plays up the party boy's side. But I know he's a lot smarter than he lets on. Like you can see it by the way he cuts the cage down, by the way he circles his opponent up against the fence. It's very, very calculated, whether that's instinct or not. But if it's instinct, it's learned from being in that circumstance many, many, many times. I think he's very smart, and I think he'll be able to pick at Derrick Lewis to the point where he'll be able to make him vulnerable. Like, of course, Derrick Lewis has always got the chance of just catching you clean. But then, like, when have we seen Tai like knocked unconscious? Like he was TKO'd by JDS, but that was from mount, and he was striking back from mount bottom, if you remember.
Yeah.
So it's not like he was unconscious.
Yeah.
He's got a hell of a chin. He might just be able to take a shot that most people wouldn't be able to, and keep going. And you know, you work Derrick Lewis over, you kick at that lead leg, and he's not got a great deal of low kick defense. You work his body, and I mean, he just can't hide it, can he? I mean, you remember the JDS fight? He was literally bent over, holding his stomach like a kid with stomachache. I think again, maybe I'm a dreamer. I don't have to, you know, be impartial anymore. I can say what I think. I'm looking forward to this fight, and I think Tai might be able to do it. I think he might beat him by decision.
Wow.
And I think he might have to really, really dig deep and probably take a couple of shots in the process. But I think it's going to be a real fascinating heavyweight fight that most people are expecting to be done in the first round. And I don't know. I think Tai is going to play this one smart.
And I love the Tuivasa era. Like, if he is able to win this one, how much fun will we have if he can have some big fights up the top of the division, maybe even title fights, so many great fights and exciting. He's just such a fun guy. The UFC are really sort of seeing that this guy can really bring a lot of fun and entertainment to fight week, and just all around, just such a good dude who brings in a different perspective compared to a lot of fighters who sort of, you know, follow the same mold and, you know, try to keep it the same way. He's very authentic, and you can see that every time he speaks. Just quickly, Dan, before we wrap up, we've got to find out. You said professional boxing match debut later this year against the Hall of Famer. Spill the tea, sis. Who's the Hall of Famer and what's the deal?
I can't. I'm still in talks with them. They've brought a few names to me, and there's a couple that look interesting. But we've got to figure out weight and stuff, because the guys they're mentioning are a little bit smaller than me. So either I've got to do a lot of work to get my weight down, or they're going to be slightly overweight for their normal weight class. We'll see what happens. I've got so many other things going on at the moment. I've just been at the PFL press conference announcing their new deal with Channel 4 in the UK, which is massive. So, you know, I've been to GB Top Team, Brad Pickett's new gym. There's loads going on in the UK. I'm so busy at the moment. I'm just waiting for someone to bring the right fight to me, and then I'll pick up my training that extra 20%, and I'll be ready.
Okay, so Dan Hardy versus Mike Tyson and George Foreman in the same night is happening later this year. But for now, guys, I would love that. The Outlaw takes out the legends. But for now, guys, make sure to follow the man on Twitter and Instagram at Dan Hardy MMA. Of course, YouTube, Full Reptile, the Dan Hardy Breakdown Show on BT Sport. I mean, the War Room, all the stuff that you do is amazing, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, his book, Full Reptile, is worth a pickup, available at bookshops all across Australia. And as always, it's an honor for us to get your insight on this crazy, crazy night of fights that's just around the corner. Can't wait, man. We cannot wait. You just got us even more excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Always good talking to you.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Have a good night, man. Bye.